Ethan knew something was off the second he opened his apartment door and saw her. Karen stood there, her face powdered white like she'd lost a fight with a bakery explosion. Her hair, once neatly pinned, was dusted and tangled, and her clothes looked as if she'd rolled through a snowstorm. Flour clung to every inch of her body like static-charged dust bunnies. Her eyes blazed with fury, and she jabbed a trembling finger at him. "You think this is funny," she screeched, sending another puff of white powder into the air between them. Ethan, still holding his coffee mug, bit the inside of his cheek to keep from laughing. It wasn't funny, at least, that's what he told himself. But okay, maybe it was. Just a little. Still, this wasn't how he imagined it would play out. The prank had been harmless in his mind. Clever. A small taste of karma for weeks of frustration. It had all started 2 weeks ago, when Ethan first realized his packages were going missing. At first, he chalked it up to the delivery guy messing up, leaving them at the wrong door, or maybe a neighbor grabbing the wrong box by accident. But the problem didn't stop. His new phone charger vanished. Then a set of noise-canceling headphones. A box of protein bars disappeared like magic. The final straw was when he ordered a pair of limited edition sneakers, and they never showed. That's when suspicion turned into certainty. He overheard Mrs. Jenkins down the hall whispering in that stage whisper way only nosy neighbors can. Karen had been seen hauling more deliveries into her apartment than anyone else in the building. Curiosity became determination. Ethan set up a hidden camera, tucked discreetly in the potted plant outside his door. The next day, like clockwork, the camera caught her, Karen, eyes darting like a cartoon villain, snatching his Amazon box and slipping back into her apartment with a practiced, smug little smile. He could have reported her right then, but something about her arrogance made him want to handle it differently. The next morning, he got creative. He carefully filled a cardboard box with flour, topped it with a crumpled old t-shirt to make it look legit, and slapped a fresh Amazon shipping label on top. His heart raced as he placed it outside his door, camera rolling. Within an hour, Karen crept into frame, snatched the box, and disappeared. Minutes later, that scream, shrill, echoing down the hallway, confirmed success. And now here she stood, powdered and seething. Ethan crossed his arms, meeting her glare. "Maybe if you stopped stealing people's packages," he said evenly, "you wouldn't look like a walking bakery." Her face twisted. "This isn't over," she spat, whirling on her heel and storming off down the hallway toward the building office. Ethan exhaled, but deep down he knew, things were about to get messy. Ethan woke up the next morning feeling victorious, but the satisfaction was short-lived. Sliding an envelope out from under his door, he squinted at the bold letters, "Notice of violation, unauthorized hallway obstruction." Confused, he read on. Apparently, his small potted plant, the one hiding his security camera, was now considered a violation of HOA policy. He let out a short laugh, shaking his head. Only one person could have orchestrated this. Karen. Petty, spiteful, vindictive Karen. Shrugging it off, he crumpled the notice and tossed it in the trash. But by late afternoon, another letter appeared. Excessive noise complaint, filed against his apartment. He hadn't made a sound all day. The accusations were obviously fabricated, a paper trail of petty vengeance. Yet knowing Karen now had official HOA power turned his amusement into unease. This wasn't just childish revenge anymore, this was targeted harassment under the cover of authority. The following day, his unease sharpened into outright frustration. Ethan went to check his mailbox only to find it empty yet again. No credit card statement. No invoice for the furniture he'd ordered. Even the package slip for the new monitor he needed for work had vanished. He could no longer pretend it was bad luck or delivery errors. It was deliberate. That evening, Mrs. Jenkins stopped him in the hallway, leaning in as though sharing state secrets. "I saw her, last night." Karen. By the mailboxes. Arms full of envelopes that weren't hers. Ethan clenched his jaw, his fists curling involuntarily at his sides. He tried to focus on work, but the sabotage didn't stop there. The next morning, his Wi-Fi crashed in the middle of an important presentation. His video froze, his client's face locked in mid-sentence on the screen. He scrambled to reset the router, heart pounding in panic, but nothing worked. Out of sheer desperation, he sprinted down the hall to the building's utility room. The panel door was hanging open, wires slightly dislodged. And there, taped inside the box, was a neon-pink sticky note. 3 mocking words, scrawled in bold red marker, "Still funny?" His blood boiled. Karen had escalated beyond petty theft into full-scale psychological warfare. She wasn't content with flour in her hair, she wanted him miserable, professionally crippled, humiliated. And she was using every tool at her disposal. Not just theft, not just sabotage, but the HOA itself. He returned to his apartment, heart racing, and threw open his laptop. His inbox was flooded with emails from the HOA board, each citing made-up violations. Unregistered guest visitors. Trash bag left outside door for more than 2 minutes. Unauthorized doormat placement. The most trivial nonsense, but in official language, giving her actions the appearance of legitimacy. He'd had enough. That evening, pulse pounding, he marched down the hallway and pounded on Karen's door. She answered with a smile so sweet it could rot teeth. "Trouble with your internet?" she asked, head tilted, eyes sparkling with malicious amusement. Ethan clenched his fists. "Cut the crap, Karen. Messing with my mail, sabotaging my router, you're taking this too far." Her smile widened, and she leaned on the doorframe like a smug queen. "Prove it," she whispered, and closed the door with a soft click that echoed in his ears like a gunshot. He stormed back to his apartment, furious and helpless. His career was suffering. His reputation in the building was crumbling under false accusations. His neighbors now glanced away awkwardly, whispers swirling behind his back. Karen was winning, not just through dirty tricks, but by manipulating perception itself. The urge for revenge burned hotter than ever. He wasn't just going to prank her this time, he was going to humiliate her in a way she couldn't cover up with a smug grin or a falsified HOA notice. At midnight, armed with a fresh bag of flour, he slipped out into the cool night. Her front yard was pristine, her ceramic garden gnome standing proudly on its pedestal. Ethan crouched down and dusted it with a thick layer of flour, coating every crease, every curl in its ceramic beard until it looked like it had weathered a freak blizzard. Satisfied, he tiptoed back inside. The next morning, a blood-curdling shriek shattered the morning silence. Ethan peered through the blinds and saw Karen, pajama-clad, gesturing wildly at her gnome. Her face was twisted in rage, and her voice carried all the way to the second floor. "I know it was you," she screamed, pointing furiously in the general direction of his apartment window. Ethan leaned out, coffee in hand, and called back with a casual grin. "Prove it." For a moment, it felt glorious. He finally had the upper hand. But then, as she stormed back inside without another word, a chill ran down his spine. She hadn't screamed back. She hadn't threatened. She hadn't retaliated in the moment. And that silence was far more terrifying than anything she could have yelled. Ethan closed his window slowly, the weight of that silence pressing on his chest. He had won this round, but Karen wasn't done playing. He could feel it. The days that followed were eerily quiet. Too quiet. Ethan knew better than to trust that silence. Every time he passed Karen's door, he could almost feel her watching from behind the peephole, calculating her next move. He triple-checked his locks, changed his Wi-Fi password, and even started using two-factor authentication on every device. But none of that prepared him for what came next. It began with an email from his internet provider. His account had been suspended, pending investigation for multiple hacking attempts originating from his IP address. Ethan's breath caught in his throat as he reread the message, his heart thudding painfully in his chest. He knew he hadn't done anything, but that didn't matter. Someone had made it look like he had. And there was no doubt in his mind who that someone was. Panicked, he called the provider. After a long hold and several frustrating transfers, a representative informed him that numerous anonymous reports had been submitted over the past week, claiming Ethan was attempting to breach other users' accounts and access restricted content. The rep's tone was cold, almost accusatory, despite Ethan's insistence that it was a setup. They told him the investigation would take at least 2 weeks and ended the call with an apologetic but dismissive sigh. That night, Ethan barely slept. Every time he closed his eyes, he imagined Karen sitting smugly in her apartment, delighting in every ounce of chaos she unleashed. But even then, he wasn't prepared for the next blow. The following afternoon, his phone buzzed with a message from his boss. It was short, professional, and devastating. Ethan, we've received concerning anonymous complaints regarding your behavior in your residence community. We'd like to put a hold on your promotion review until we've had a chance to clarify these allegations. Please reach out to HR. He felt his stomach twist painfully. His career, the promotion he'd been working toward for months, was slipping through his fingers, all because of Karen's lies. Rage and helplessness tangled inside him, knotting tighter with each passing second. He couldn't let her win. That evening, he called Chloe. He didn't have to explain, she could hear the exhaustion in his voice. They met at his apartment, and over takeout boxes and cold coffee, they plotted. This time, they needed something bigger, bolder, something that Karen couldn't twist or deny. Ethan ordered an oversized box, carefully packing it with an enormous flour bag rigged to explode with a hidden triggering mechanism. Chloe printed a flawless shipping label, complete with tracking stickers and forged delivery markings. The box looked indistinguishable from a real Amazon package. The next morning, they placed it in the hallway, right outside Ethan's door, perfectly in frame of his security camera. Then, they waited. Minutes passed. Hours. Ethan's nerves frayed with every tick of the clock. He was beginning to wonder if Karen had finally grown cautious. But just as he got up to pour another cup of coffee, the camera feed flickered. Karen's door creaked open. She peered out, eyes darting down the hallway. Slowly, like a predator stalking prey, she padded toward the box. Her hand hovered for a moment before grabbing it. She glanced left, right, then hurried back into her apartment, her door clicking shut behind her. Ethan and Chloe exchanged wide-eyed looks. Seconds later, the muffled boom sounded from behind Karen's door, followed by a flurry of coughs and shrill, furious screams. A cloud of flour burst from the thin gap beneath the doorframe, puffing into the hallway like smoke from a fire. Ethan nearly fell off his chair laughing, Chloe doubling over beside him. The tension of the last few weeks dissolved into pure, unfiltered relief. But the moment of victory was short-lived. Karen's door slammed open. She stormed into the hallway, her hair, face, and clothes coated in flour so thick she looked like a deranged snowman. Her eyes locked onto Ethan's camera, burning with rage and humiliation. Without a word, she spun on her heel and stormed toward the building office. Ethan's laughter died in his throat. Chloe's smile faltered. That wasn't just anger on Karen's face. That was the look of someone plotting something much, much worse. The fallout came faster than Ethan could have imagined. By the next morning, his phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Notifications poured in, texts from friends, emails from coworkers, even a couple of voicemails from his manager asking if he'd seen the news. Confused, he opened his browser and immediately felt his stomach lurch. There she was. Karen. Her flour-covered face frozen in mid-scream, plastered across every major social media platform. Chloe had uploaded the video the night before with the cheeky caption "Flower Phantom Strikes Back," and the internet had devoured it. Memes were flooding every corner of the web: Karen photoshopped as a ghost haunting a bakery, Karen as a yeti stomping through a snowstorm, even remixed videos of her shriek auto-tuned into ridiculous songs. At first, Ethan felt triumphant. After all the sabotage, the harassment, the lies, finally, she was the one being exposed and humiliated. But as the day wore on and the views climbed into the millions, that satisfaction began to sour. Karen wasn't just a neighborhood joke anymore. She had become a full-blown viral sensation. And with that exposure came consequences neither of them could have anticipated. That evening, Ethan heard loud voices echoing from the hallway. He cracked his door open just enough to peek out and saw Karen pacing furiously, phone pressed to her ear, gesturing wildly as if she could swat away the comments flooding her feed. Her voice trembled, not just with rage, but with panic. Every few steps, she'd glance toward Ethan's door, her face a cocktail of humiliation and hatred. For the first time, he wondered if they had gone too far. It wasn't long before the narrative flipped. Karen, ever resourceful, took to the internet with her own post, a teary-eyed video claiming she had been bullied and harassed by neighbors for months, framed and targeted in a cruel campaign of public humiliation. She talked about the pressures of living in a tight-knit community, the isolation, the relentless stress of keeping up appearances. She didn't name Ethan directly, but everyone who had seen the viral video knew exactly who she was talking about. The response was swift and furious. People who had laughed at the video hours earlier now filled her comment sections with sympathy and outrage. How could anyone do this to her? This is bullying. She deserves better. Overnight, Karen transformed herself from villain to victim, and Ethan, once the underdog in this battle, became the heartless bully in the public eye. The guilt hit him like a freight train. Chloe tried to reassure him, arguing that Karen had brought it on herself, but the damage was done. His neighbors' glances turned from curious to cold. Mrs. Jenkins avoided eye contact. Even Frank, Karen's husband, showed up at Ethan's door, his face pale and drawn. "Look, man," Frank began, rubbing the back of his neck. "I get it. She's been out of control. But this?" His voice cracked. "She lost her new job this morning. Her boss saw the video, and it embarrassed the whole company. They let her go on the spot." Ethan's mouth went dry. Frank leaned against the doorframe, exhausted. "She's spiraling. Hasn't left the apartment in 2 days. I tried talking to her, but she just blames everyone else. Especially you." Ethan nodded slowly, feeling the weight of everything collapse onto his shoulders. Frank pushed off the doorframe with a sigh. "Just give her space, man. For both your sakes." When Frank left, Ethan sat on the edge of his couch, staring at nothing. He had wanted to teach Karen a lesson, but he hadn't meant to ruin her life. He couldn't shake the image of her pacing in that hallway, more human than monster for the first time. His phone buzzed again. Another message from HR. "We need to discuss the recent events affecting your reputation." The war he thought he'd won suddenly felt like a battlefield strewn with casualties on both sides. Weeks passed, and the chaos that once buzzed through the building hallways slowly faded into a strange, tense quiet. Ethan kept his head down, focused on repairing his strained reputation at work, while Karen all but vanished from sight. The flower memes slowed. The comments quieted. Neighbors went back to exchanging polite nods, though their glances at Ethan still carried whispers of judgment. One afternoon, as he walked past Karen's apartment, he heard faint laughter drifting from inside, not bitter or mocking, but light and genuine. He paused, unsure whether to feel relieved or wary. A few days later, Ethan found out why. Sitting on his couch, scrolling through his feed, he nearly dropped his phone when an ad autoplayed. There she was, Karen, stepping into a pristine kitchen set, flour canister in hand, a sly smile on her face. She tripped, flour exploding into a perfectly staged cloud around her as the screen froze on her powdered face. The tagline appeared, "Bake with confidence, no surprises this time." The commercial ended with Karen winking at the camera, fully owning her humiliating viral moment. He couldn't believe it. He spotted her the next morning, standing at her doorway watering a hanging plant as if nothing had ever happened. She caught his stare and smirked. "Might as well make some money off misery, right?" she said, her voice carrying that old sharp edge but softened with something else, pride, maybe even self-awareness. For the first time, Ethan found himself smiling back. The war was over, and somehow, Karen had turned disaster into opportunity. But as he walked away, shaking his head in disbelief, he couldn't help but wonder, after everything they'd put each other through, after all the sabotage, pranks, and public humiliation, had she really lost, or had she won in the most unexpected way of all? Have you ever felt powerless against HOA, or Karen, rules? Share your experiences below, let's see who had it worse.